In this video, I'll demonstrate the deduplication feature in the Hookdeck Event Gateway. Deduplication helps you ignore redundant events by comparing incoming requests against ones you've already processed within a time window. You control what counts as identical. That could be the entire payload or just specific fields in the body or headers that matter in your use case. This solves two common problems: duplicate suppression, preventing the same event being retried by a provider from being processed multiple times by your backend, and noise suppression, so filtering out irrelevant events like inventory fluctuations while still processing meaningful changes such as product title updates. Really up to you to configure. So let's dive into a demo. This project allows me to control sending duplicate events. The first thing I need to do is go into Hookdeck and create a connection. So I'm going to create a new source. This could be of a specific type: Shopify, Stripe, Paddle, if you know where you're getting duplicate events from or you want to do fine-grained filtering. In this case, I'm just going to say it's a generic webhook endpoint. So I'm going to say ecom updates. Obviously, we'll skip authentication for the demo. And the destination, in this case, we'll just use a mock endpoint and a fake backend that processes our ecom updates. Again, we'll miss out a lot of the configuration options here, and we'll also turn off retries. Right, we've created our connection. Now we can get the URL. Right, first thing we want to do is set our source URL to be used within the demo. And now we can start triggering duplicate events. So the first thing is to send two identical events with no deduplication rules enabled. So if we go back into the Hookdeck dashboard, you can see we've got two events. What we'll do first is we'll look at requests. So these are the inbound HTTP requests to Hookdeck. Now here's the first one. We'll see under here an event has been created, and then ultimately that event has been delivered over HTTP to the destination, our mock endpoint in this case. And the second request has also resulted in an event being created, even though we've got an event ID here. We've got over here the same event twice. We've got a duplicate, however, it's been sent to our backend. Our backend has had to process it. So how do we avoid that? It's one of the reasons that deduplication exists. So now we can enable deduplication, and we can choose how it identifies that it's a duplicate event by comparing to previous payloads. So in this case, it will hash all the event data it receives, and it will compare for a minute. So that'll do for now. Let's save that. Go up to requests, and we'll trigger those requests again. So now we've seen two more requests come in. Here's the first one. We'll see it's created an event. And the second one was marked as a duplicate because when we hashed the two payloads, they were duplicates. So that's comparing based on the full event. But what happens if something small changes? So for instance, say there's a timestamp that identifies when that request was made. So although the payloads are effectively duplicates, there's one small difference in there. So what we can do now is we can trigger, but the timestamps will differ. Right, let's have a look in our requests. So we've got the first one that's come in. We can see in here, there's the timestamp value. And the second one, which also had an event created, actually had a different timestamp value, even though everything else, including the event ID, was the same. So in that situation, if we know there's a unique identifier, the event ID, we should use that instead of the full hash of the payload. So let's go into our deduplication rule. Let's change it from, instead of being all event data, to being a specific field. We can see it's pre-populated the fields for us, and we can use the event ID value. So let's save that. Now let's trigger the two events with the same payload, but again with different timestamps. Now this time, go into requests. Two more events have come in, two requests have come in, sorry. See the first one, request created. The second one, in this case, now because we're using the event ID as a unique identifier, has been marked as a duplicate. The other way of doing this is, in some situations, instead of having one identifier to use, event ID, you might just go, okay, well, what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to exclude a property, one or more properties. So now if I go into connections, look at my rule. I don't want to do specific fields. I want to exclude the timestamp value. So this basically does the same. It will have the same result as the just using the event ID, but in this case, it will do a hash of everything other than the timestamp value. So just to prove that works, we've triggered those two events again. Look at requests. 2 more events have come in. The first one had an event created. The second one was marked as a duplicate. Now, every time you change the duplication configuration, dedupe configuration, you reset the cache that is used to identify the duplicates. So be cautious when you change those values. So one other thing I want to show is composites. So say we've got this econ processing, which processes all unique events, but I have a destination that is just interested in inventory events and only inventory events that have changed. So in this case, I'm going to say there's a new endpoint. So we go ecom inventory. And here I'm going to remove the retry rule. I'm going to add deduplication. I'm only interested if a combination of body.eventID, body.sku, and body.stock count changes. So in this case, the inventory endpoint will only get it if it's a unique identifier, a unique event, if it's a SKU, and if the stock count has changed. So that combination represents that that's a unique event that the inventory endpoint is interested in. A final note here is, of course, your rule can be applied in any order you define. So if you've got a transformation, say you want the timestamp to the nearest minute, you can do that within the transformation first and then apply a filter or a deduplication rule afterwards. So it can be applied in the order that you define. So that's an overview of the deduplication rule. So whether you want to avoid retry storms, noisy events, and just ultimately reduce the amount of events you have to process, have a look at deduplication. Please let us know what you think and what you build. Thanks.